Architecture CodeX. If you want to see more, like, comment, share, and most importantly, subscribe.
In 1922, the publishers of the Chicago Tribune decided to build a new building. And those publishers, Robert McCormick and Joseph Patterson, announced an open competition for the design of their new headquarters. They received submissions from 263 firms across 26 countries. You would think that this being the 20th century and modern architecture having been birthed in the 19th century by the likes of Louis Sullivan and Adolf Loos, that this 20th century media powerhouse would build a modern 20th century skyscraper. Looking at the submissions, there was ample opportunity to go modern, to jump with both feet into the cold water of rational architecture. And if you look at the designs submitted by Walter Gropius and Adolf Meyer, you see modernism exploring the nature of tower. But instead of jumping in, the jurists dipped their toe only and quickly withdrew. The winner was an imitation of the Gothic Butter Tower at the Cathedral of Rouen, designed by Raymond Hood and John Mead Howells. By sheer odds, the building was going to be some sort of romantic revival architecture. Even modern architect Adolf Loos chickened out and submitted a neoclassical design, a singular colossal fluted Doric column to hold up, what? The sky? It is reported the submission was made to mock the other romantic revivalist designs, but as it were, he did not submit a serious modern tower. And so from what seemed like the endless array of neo-obelisks, modified Grecian temples, and even Elio Serinen's design, which was really just muted Gothic, perhaps the Rouen Tower was the best. If the jury had gone with Gropius's design, we might have seen the emergence of the modern skyscraper 30 years earlier than we did when Mies built 860-880 Lakeshore Drive in 1951, or Skidmore, Owens & Merrill built the Lever House in 1952, or even the UN building built by a consortium of modern architects also in 1952. As it happens, while Gropius's design inspired the idea of modern glass tower, he never built one that looked like it. The only real skyscraper he designed was the old Pan Am MetLife building, which hovers above Grand Central Terminal. Instead, the 1925 Gothic Tribune Tower replaced the 1913 Gothic Woolworth Tower as the tallest building in the world. Revivalist architects simply did not appreciate the potential for the office skyscraper as a new form. Rather, to make it relatable to the general population, they used an architectural language, a vernacular already understood because of the many Gothic churches. For those designs submitted that drifted away from strictly Gothic towers, there was still a tendency for the tower to imitate a column, as Adolf Loos did literally, by designing each tower with a base, shaft, and a capital. Articulating the design of a tower into its separate parts, the base, the shaft, and the capital, continued on into the modern era. Even the World Trade Center's Architectural Codex number 15 had subtle differences at the base of the tower and the top of the tower, or the capital, that distinguished it from most of the floors that made up the shaft. And you can see that even in greater emphasis at the City Core building and the AT&T building. That trend continues today when you look at something like 220 Central Park South by Robert Stern, Architecture Codex number 33. I cannot say if the jury, which included Louis Sullivan, saw their selection as cowardly. I don't know that they considered modern architecture at all. It would have been a bold move in 1925, and the reality was that in the first half of the 20th century, none of the skyscrapers built embraced Bauhaus modernism. It reminds me of the Far Side cartoon, where Santa opens his closet of red suits, where one blue suit hangs, and he wonders if maybe this is the year. Or was the selection less about avoiding modernist architecture controversy and more about how much fun it would be to build a Gothic tower in the 1920s? It might have just been the bee's knees, the cat's meow, or maybe simply keen. In a unique form of cultural appropriation, the base of the tower is embedded with pieces of famous buildings from all over the world as a symbol of the reach of the reporters who worked for the Chicago Tribune. These include pieces from the Great Pyramid at Giza, the Parthenon in Greece, Notre Dame de Paris, the Forbidden City in China, the Mosque of Suleiman the Magnificent in Istanbul, St. Peter's in Rome, Independence Hall in Philadelphia, more recent additions like a piece of the Berlin Wall and the World Trade Center, and of course, the cathedral at Rouen. Winning the Tribune Tower Commission effectively launched Raymond Hood's career. But aside from the concurrent American Radiator Building in New York City, he did not continue with literal revivalist designs. If you look at New York's McGraw-Hill Building in 1931, you see him easing his way into Art Deco, which flourished when he was part of the extensive team of architects who worked on the Rockefeller Center buildings in the 1930s. Art Deco was modern, but still decorative. And we don't know where Hood would have gone architecturally afterwards because he died in 1934. So how does one critique a 20th century building designed to look like a medieval tower that got its defining crown in the 16th century? Is the building better if it's more exact like that tower, or is it better if it changes itself and becomes different? Another form of modern architecture. And how do you even define modern architecture in the 1920s? The Rouen Butter Tower, reportedly named because in order to raise money to build it, they allowed people to pay money to eat butter during Lent, is 252 feet tall. The Chicago Tribune Tower is almost twice the height at 463 feet tall. And while the Rouen Tower is the definitive flamboyant style of Gothic architecture, significantly more delicate and more decorous than earlier Gothic architecture, the detailing on the Tribune Tower is significantly less Gothic. For example, at the base, the main entrance arch is round-topped and not pointed. Even the flamboyant portals above it have stunted, flat arches. The shaft is a series of vertical stone fillets separated by vertical glass and decorative steel flutes. Nothing particularly Gothic here. While at Rouen, the shaft, there are a series of pointed arches that get increasingly narrow as you ascend. At the top of the Tribune Tower, the Capitol, the glass flutes are topped by a flat round-top arch. Even the signature buttresses, articulating the more delicate carvings of the crown, have flattened round-top arches. Was the pointed arch considered too Christian or maybe just too Catholic for a secular building? Since World War II, we saw more glass towers going up, and the idea of historically based design motifs for a skyscraper seemed both quaint and naive. But at one point, the endless repetition of minimalist glass shafts, uniform and undistinguished, just got boring. With the coming of postmodernism and through to now, we see more towers going up employing the lessons learned by the earlier revivalist towers, trying to resolve historic but low-slung building styles with the extreme heights of a skyscraper. Compare the Tribune Tower competition's second-place design by Elio Saarinen with the Wells Fargo Center in Minneapolis by Cesar Pele, and you might see what I mean. Given its long-lasting effects on American skyscraper design, it was only natural that in 1980, Chicago architect Stanley Tigerman organized what he called late entries to the Chicago Tribune Tower competition. And many famous architects submitted their designs. Some were tongue-in-cheek. Revisiting the competition continues sporadically through today. And when my architecture school had its own late entries competition, I submitted my design, with the tower looking like a giant rolled up newspaper with the cross-bracing rubber band, much like the cross-bracing on the John Hancock Tower. A newspaper much more suited to swatting the dog than reading. I did not win. I'm Michael Molinelli, and this is Architecture Codex.